Agent B is just strictly focused on talking about business, talking about real estate facts, and they're posting the same amount of content. They have the same effort, but a different strategy, and they're getting completely different results because Agent A is producing content that people can actually connect with, and Agent B is simply just advertising themselves as a business, and that is what people scroll right past. You can have a million views and zero clients, and a lot of agents are finding that out the hard way. We've been told that the goal is reach, get in front of more people, more eyes, more exposure, more followers, and eventually it turns into business. So agents are grinding to grow their audience, optimizing for the algorithm, chasing reach like it's the finish line. But here is what nobody's actually saying out loud: reach doesn't convert, recognition does, and those are not the same thing. By the end of this episode, you're going to see exactly why the agents who are getting consistent inbound leads from content are not the ones with the biggest following and what they're doing instead that actually works. This is Above Asking. I'm Alyssa Stalker. Let's get into it. Real quick before we dive in, this episode is brought to you by Coffee and Contracts. If you're a real estate agent trying to build your brand on social media and you want content that actually works without spending hours staring at a blank screen, that's exactly why Coffee and Contracts exists. Done for you content, templates, strategy, and a whole community of agents building their businesses the same way you are. Try a free week at coffeecontracts.com/above asking, and the link is in the show notes. Okay, let's actually get into it. So, first, let's talk about why reach feels like the goal. And reach is a very common metric that agents want to track because they feel like obviously what they want to do is reach more people. And if your post is not getting past 200 view jail, that's incredibly frustrating, especially when you spend so much time and put so much effort into the content that you're creating. But what you don't realize is that the follower count, the reach, those metrics don't really matter. You really need to focus more on building relationships because relationships lead to conversations and conversations lead to conversions, or what we would say are clients. That's what matters on social media is the relationships that you're building. And in your area, you may not reach a lot of people. We talk to so many different types of agents within Coffee and Contracts, like in our weekly coaching calls. And one of the common agents that we talk to are people who say, well, how do I make this content for me? I'm in a really small rural area, or I serve, a whole hour radius around me because I don't live in a densely populated city. And so there's a different approach there for sure. It's a lot easier, I would say, for somebody who lives in a broader market, a big city that has tons of restaurants to show, tons of areas, tons of parks. But what I think agents who live in these smaller or more spread out areas, I should say, should focus on is really what those agents should focus on too. It's building relationships, and you don't need a ton of followers to do that. You just need to be connecting with the right people. And so, social media is that channel of discovery, it's that pathway to get people to find you and to connect with you. And when you're in a smaller area and you can't show the same, maybe you only have a few restaurants, you can't show that all the time. The type of content that you want to be posting is more personal content, but also what it feels like to live there. And the reason why people would want to move to your area, I feel like relocation content or content for locals that are wanting to make moves within the area, there's different types of motives for why people want to move. Maybe they need more space. Maybe they need to downsize. Maybe they want to be closer to a certain school. Maybe they want to be closer to freeway access or an airport. There's so many reasons why people want to make moves. And so you need to just come at the content from that angle. It's not always about showing restaurants and things like that. That's not what local content is specifically. It's more about showing up as a local and what it feels like to live in your community and finding things that are relatable and speaking to people's pain points who want to move locally. So, real estate has always ran on name recognition. And I think agents, when they come to social media, that's their goal is like, I just want to get my name out there. I want to just be extremely visible. But if you don't attach a brand to that name, you're doing yourself a disservice because nobody knows really who you are or what you stand for. It's so different than advertising on, you know, a sign at the grocery store or a park bench or billboard where the name recognition or even agents who take over neighborhoods where their signs are everywhere. Sometimes they do get business because they have name recognition in a neighborhood, but name recognition alone doesn't help you be more successful or your posts perform better on social media. What does is that brand because it bridges that gap and creates the connection between who you are and who you help. And that's ultimately what people connect with. And I can think of someone as a great example. I was just speaking at an event called Level Up in Michigan just a week ago from the time that I'm recording this episode. And one of the other speakers, her name is Cara Farah, and she's out of North Carolina. And she has everything pink about her brand. And her brand's not just a color, but that's one of the things that you know immediately. This has Cara's touch on it. She even dresses in pink, like when she speaks, because that's a part of her brand. And you connect that color with her name. But something else is that she also is a big believer in her faith, and she brings that to her business. She brings that to her content, her approach, how she connects with clients, and she's very open about that. And so, all of these different things that people can relate to, but also the visual recognition that she has created in her area, she's been able to dominate and create massive reach. And even down to her car is pink. Like everything you see is pink. So go check out Cara Farah on Instagram. She's also a super sweet human being. And you can definitely learn a lot from her. She has an amazing business. But that's really what it is. It's when people think of your name, what visuals come to mind? What feeling comes to mind? What perspective comes to mind? That's really what you want to focus on when it comes to being recognizable in the social media world versus just your name alone. So the difference is people knowing you exist versus thinking of you when it's time to actually make a move. And that latter part where they're thinking about you when it's time to make a move comes from building that connection through relationships and having conversations, but also that relatability that comes from tying in what your personal brand is, who you are, what you represent, what your perspective is. That connection is what makes people think of you because you have that top of mind awareness, not just as a name, not just as an agent, someone who's always talking about business, but as a person that people like, that they connect with, that they ultimately want to work with. So if we look at this example, you could say, let's say we have agent A and agent B. They're posting with the same frequency, they're showing up every day, they are tracking their reach, their likes, their comments, and they think they're doing all the things that they're supposed to be doing, but they're getting completely different results because agent A is taking people through her day. She is showing people what she's doing behind the scenes, how hard she works. She's showing people when she goes to the baseball field, she's connecting as a mom, making sure that it's obvious that her family is a priority. She works with family, she connects with family, she understands other families' pain points or things that matter to them. She's showing family things to do in her local content. But then agent B is just strictly focused on talking about business, talking about real estate facts, and they're posting the same amount of content. They have the same effort, but a different strategy and they're getting completely different results because agent A is producing content that people can actually connect with, and agent B is simply just advertising themselves as a business, and that is what people scroll right past. Another way that your content becomes recognizable is that it has that visual presence that if your name wasn't on it, people would still know that it's you because it speaks so loudly to who you are and what your brand is about on a visual level. A great example I could think of this is Brian Bull. I love following her. She also is really big on talking about personal branding, but is a very successful agent out of Northern California. She's come to one of my events to speak before. She is so amazing at her personal brand. And if I could describe it, it almost feels like the friend that you want to go have a wine tasting day with meets like a little bit of that home comfort of like family and feel good of like a Nancy Meyers movie. Like she has dialed her personal brand so well that when I'm scrolling, I don't even need to see her name. I immediately know it's her content, no matter what it says, because it just brings that visual feeling to exactly what she is talking about. And that's ultimately where we get to these different types of content where we've talked about attract content, we've talked about nurture content and what each one does and what they don't do. And if you haven't heard that yet, if you're just coming to the show on this episode, definitely go back and check out some of those past episodes because we talk about this framework a lot and it's what we teach inside of Coffee and Contracts. And it's attract, nurture, convert. And that attraction content is ultimately what grabs someone's attention, makes them decide to follow you. And that happens through really strong hooks, but also visual hooks. And so that's what we're talking about why the visuals of your personal brand matter. And it's not just your colors or the fonts you pick, it's like the overall feeling of the clips, the way they're filmed, the lighting, the style, the feeling, even the audio that you're choosing all kind of encompass this feeling of your brand. And so that's super important that it comes across between the attract content and the nurture content because the nurture content is where you get to come in and talk about your expertise, to talk about you as an authority, an expert in your area. And that's ultimately what leads someone to want to work with you down the road. But you have to attract them first and you have to find a way to connect it all. And that's how you do that with your personal brand, especially on a visual level. So let's talk about what makes content sticky. And those things are your point of view, your voice, and something that people can hold on to long after they scroll past your posts. Like, what do you want to be known for? What do you want people to think about when they think about you as an agent or your brand? And I love to ask this question sometimes at the top of our weekly coaching call. I'll say, what is it? What is one thing that you hope your content says to someone this week? And if you could think about that, it gives you the lens that you really need of how you're going to approach your content, like what hooks you're going to use, what you're going to talk about. And you may have these general content pillars like local content, authority builders, listing features. But the way you talk about a listing or the way you approach what you're talking about in your authority builder is completely influenced by what you want people to know or think or feel from working with you. And I think a lot of people don't consider that. They consider most like, what am I trying to say? What am I saying? Or what do I think people want to hear versus what do I want to be known for that sets me apart? What do I want people to feel when they work with me? Because people connect with a feeling more than they connect with knowledge or tips or education. And so you have to think about that. And it's important to deliver information that people want to know, right? That's why educational content still does exist, just not in its traditional form. It's all in how you package it, how you present it, how you make it relate to who your ideal client and your audience is, and how you give your unique perspective on that piece of content. I think something interesting about today's buyers and sellers that come to people through social media, they're not necessarily picking the person that they saw the most, or they're no longer picking the person that they've seen a ton of signs or ads in their area. They're picking people based on connection because there's a lot of choices. And so not only do they want to know that you are good at what you do, you can get the job done and you can do it well and you can meet or exceed their expectations, I think they actually care about, do they like you? Do they connect with you? Do they feel comfortable working with you? And that's just something that an ad or a billboard can't give someone. And that is really the beauty of social media, but it's also become the norm now that that's what people come to social media for. So when people see someone, they go immediately and look them up on social media to get a feel for who they are and what they're all about. You can't get that from simply looking at a sign. And so your accolades and your results matter, but so does who you are and how you approach working with people and how they feel around you. And building that trust is ultimately what the foundation of that connection is. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to do what I call the 9 post test. And that's the first 9 posts. Like when you land on your account, you land on your feed, and this could be Instagram or TikTok. You want to look at your feed grid and ask yourself, could a stranger tell your brand who you are, what you're about, what you do, how you make them feel, and how they could relate to you from your last 9 posts? If they can't, that is the lens that you are going to create all of your content from here on out. And if you could just ask yourself that one simple question, what do I want to make people feel working with me this week? Or what do I want people to know about me working with me when you're creating your content this week? Those are the things that are going to actually set your content apart from just posting generic local content or generic real estate content. You need to add that personal element about you, but also how it connects and relates to your ideal client. If you take one thing from today, reach gets you in the room. Memory gets you the client, and you can't get remembered if you're making content that could belong to anyone. If you want to actually build that, the frameworks, the strategy, the content that works for your specific brand, that's exactly what Coffee and Contracts gives you. There's a free week linked in the show notes. Go check it out. And if this one landed for you, the one thing I'm going to ask is that you share it, send it to another agent who you know is stuck in the reach spiral. That's it, just one person. Until next time, stay above asking.